Okay, my topic today is the dangers of social Darwinism. I'm going to talk a little bit about social Darwinism. Social Darwinism, beginning in 1887, social scientists were using the term social Darwinism to apply the survival of the fittest theory to social situations. Under this theory, the wealthiest or most powerful in society must be biologically superior and less fit people should die. This view, called social Darwinism, is a logical extension of Darwinian evolution theory, and it was articulated by Charles Darwin himself. And so it evolved to different areas, but this was what it was originally, and it's still evolving today. Darwin was not the first to theorize the link between man and animals through the process of evolution. Thousands of years before Darwin was born, Hindus, Buddhists, and Taoists taught evolution. The theory of evolution is not scientific but religious. It's an occult belief. And so the ideas that come from social Darwinism are not new either. But when Darwin took this old occult belief and said it's a fact and said he had science to prove it, then it allowed them to be intellectually fulfilled atheists and evolutionists, and thought it was a fact and gave them a reason to fight harder, I guess. Here's the cover of his book, On the Origin of Species by Means of Natural Selection or Preservation of Favored Races in the Struggle for Life. Well, they have applied this, and he kind of applied it in his second book as the races in the human race. And that's what basically social Darwinism, the preservation of favored races in the struggle for life. This is from Stephen Jay Gould. Biological arguments for racism may have been common before 1850, but they increased by order of magnitude following the acceptance of the evolutionary theory. And so that's true, because it became, when this whole idea became a fact and everybody started accepting it, then it grew by orders of magnitude. Here's a quote from Charles Darwin in his Descent of Man, chapter 3. At some future period, not very distant as measured by centuries, the civilized races of man will almost certainly exterminate and replace the savage races throughout the world. And so that's the idea of social Darwinism. Darwin's cousin, Sir Francis Galton, founded the eugenics movement, and eugenics is the science which seeks to improve the biological makeup of human species by selective breeding. They're kind of speeding up the process. Galton advocated the regulation of marriage and family size according to the genetic qualities of the parents. He believed that if controlled breeding was applied to humans as with farm animals, a perfect human breed could be developed. So that's kind of the thoughts behind eugenics, which is a natural extension, evolution of social Darwinism. The evolutionary ideas of Charles Darwin destructively influenced many Western world leaders in the early 20th century, and it spread around, and they started teaching it in their schools in various countries, and those countries all ended up being part of the Axis powers in World War II, and they started all the wars. Karl Marx was one of them who was influenced by the thinking of Darwin. He was an atheist, but he's the founder of scientific socialism, and that is it's a conclusion of social Darwinism. and it's basically the socialism we have in Cuba and Russia and Venezuela and a lot of the other countries. Influenced by Hegel, Friedrich, and Henry, wrote Das Kapital and Manifesto of the Communist Party. Here's what he said: the classes and the races too weak to master the new conditions of life must give way. They must perish to the revolutionary Holocaust. Interesting, he calls it a Holocaust, and I guess he thought he could speed it up with a big Holocaust, and I think someone else came up with that idea too. So you see, he has this idea of social Darwinism. Frederick Engel, just as Darwin discovered the laws of evolution in organic nature, so Marx discovered the laws of evolution in human history. He applied it to everything. And not just history, it's to government and to economics and everything. Karl Marx, he never ran a company, never held a political office, never oversaw any accounts, never held a job, any job, supported through his life by his friend Frederick Engels and his father a little bit, and the son of a wealthy factory owner, considered by many to be the greatest social, political, economic philosopher of all times, and his applications of his theory ended in failure, utter failure economically, and in mass death and misery. Here's Valderick Lenin. He said, atheism is a natural, inseparable part of Marxism, of the theory and the practice of scientific socialism. There's the scientific socialism, and atheism is all part of that, and it doesn't, and anyone with a biblical worldview can see that it's a bad idea. Death toll of communism. We're not going to go any more depth of communism. Total deaths under communist regimes: China 65 million, Russia, USSR 20 million, Cambodia 2 million, North Korea 2 million, Africa 2 million, Afghanistan 1.5 million, Yugoslavia 1 million, Vietnam 1 million. The total of 94.5 million. It's probably gone higher since this was put out. Indian philosopher Latina Deliva says his Darwin's theory of survival of the fittest was warmly welcomed by the social scientists of the day, and they believed mankind had achieved various levels of evolution, culminating in the white man's civilization. By the second half of the 19th century, racism was accepted as fact by a vast majority of Western scientists. Soon after social Darwinism took sway in the minds of many, they began to view racial struggles and war itself as a perfectly natural example of survival of the fittest in the human race. The horrific wars of the 20th century, employing shockingly brutal tactics, were encouraged by a belief in the survival of the fittest among humans, or social Darwinism. Charles Darwin, the support which I received from Germany is my treat, chief ground for my hoping that our views will ultimately prevail. And that was written in a letter from Charles Darwin to Wilhelm Preyer. And so Germany took off. They bought his book and went crazy, started teaching it in their schools, and kept teaching it in their schools. Not necessarily, they wrote their own science books based on this, and Hitler did get rid of his books, but it doesn't matter. They already had their own science books teaching evolution in their schools. And that's really where social Darwinism took off, besides communist Russia. Intellectuals in Germany were among the earliest to embrace Darwinism enthusiastically and to apply its concepts of survival of the fittest to human society. That is, they applied the subtitle of origin on the origin of species by means of natural selection or the preservation of favored races in the struggle for life. They applied the second part to that. The most infamous result of this was the Holocaust, but social Darwinism has also a major influence in events leading up to World War I. One of the big events was the Hero War, and this was kind of a colony of the German people, and they decided these were inferior races, and they decided to wipe them out. The Hurarian Wars were a series of colonial wars between German Empire and the Hurarian people of German Southwest Africa, present-day Namibia, between 1904 and 1908. The German military attempted to eradicate the Hurarian people in Southwest Africa. By 1908, it had established over 80% of the Hurarian people had been killed, so they wiped them out. The average German here looks upon and treats the natives as creatures being more or less the same as baboons. That's what a German missionary in Africa observed. The war of annihilation is a natural law. Without the organic world could not continue to exist at all without evolution. Social Darwinism. Just as nature, the struggle for existence, is the moving principle of evolution and perfection, so the world's history, the destruction of weaker nations through the stronger, is a postulate of the process. That's German Friedrich Hellwell. According to Darwin's theory, wars have been always the greatest importance for the general process of the human species. The physically weaker, the less intelligent, the morally lower, must give place to the stronger. German biologist Heinrich Ziegler. In the decades leading up to World War I, the intellectuals embraced Darwinism and its empirical implication as a welcome alternative to Christian beliefs and ethics. So they got rid of the Christian worldview, the Christian ethics, and came up with their own ideas. Ernest Haeckel, the most famous German Darwinist of the time and the notorious forger of embryo diagrams, believed that evolution would bring forth a complete revolution in the entire world view of humanity. He argued that Darwinism is required the abandonment of Christian morals. See, they see one of the big obstacles is Christianity in their struggles. World War I, we're going to look at that a second. World War I was one of the deadliest conflicts in history of the human race, with over 16 million people died. Leading German thinkers believed the war was a biological necessity, a natural outgrowth of Darwinian struggle for survival. Social Darwinism led to World War I. By the time Second World War, we find the full flower of social Darwinism and fascism. Hitler based his fascism on the evolutionary theory, as is evident from both his speeches and his book Mein Kampf. Benito Mussolini, who brought fascism to Italy, was also greatly influenced by Darwinism, which he thought supported his belief that violence is essential for beneficial social transformation. Mussolini repeatedly used Darwinian catchwords in his speeches and ridiculed efforts at peace because they were interfered with the natural evolutionary process. Sir Arthur Keith, British anthropologist, an atheist, The German Fuhrer, as I have constantly maintained, is an evolutionist. He has constantly sought to make the practice of Germany conform to the theory of evolution. John Tolles, an essential of Hitler's conclusion in his book was that the conviction drawn from Darwin that might makes right. A second book. In his biology of Hitler, crude social Darwinism gave Hitler his entire political worldview. It gave his whole worldview. It gave his worldview of everything. Until the advent of Darwinism, the sanctity of human life was taken for granted in Eastern law and thought. And so evolution cheapened the dignity of human. But many German intellectuals began to argue that some had a greater right to life than others, namely those who were deemed more valuable to society. This inequality was mainly based on race, but the Darwinians argued that there were inferior individuals within a race as well. For instance, zoologist and politician Carl Vogt argued that a mentally handicapped child was closer in value to an ape than his own parents. The law of selection exists in the world. The stronger and the healthier has received from nature the right to live. Well, to anyone who is weak, who does not stand his ground, he may not expect any help from anyone. Hitler, using evolutionary theory to justify racial supremacy. If nature does not wish that the weaker individual should mate with the stronger, she wishes even less that a superior race should intermingle with an inferior race, because in such case, all her efforts throughout hundreds and thousands of years to establish an evolutionary high stage of being must may thus be rendered futile. So it's going to ruin the evolution over hundreds of thousands of years. He believed in evolution. Adolf Hitler, the law of selection justifies this incessant struggle by allowing the survival of the fittest. Christianity is rebellion against the natural law, a protest against nature. Taking to its logical extreme, Christian would mean systematic cultivation of human failure. So Christians want to ruin all of the thousands and hundreds of thousands of years of evolution, and we're against social Darwinism because we know it's a bad idea. Here we have what Hitler's hit list from Hitler's Movement, page 107. The blonde, blue-eyed Nordic, close to pure Aryan. Germanic, brown, blue-eyed, predominantly Aryan. Mediterranean, slightly Aryan. Slavic, close to half Aryan, half ape. Oriental, slight ape, predominance. Black African, predominantly ape. Jewish, closer to pure ape. I don't know how he got all that, but anyway, that's the people he thought he should get rid of and have all of them take over from the top two, probably. If it were not for Darwinism, the application of his theory called Social Darwinism, the Holocaust would likely never have occurred in Germany. Darwinism is the idea that all living species, including humans, are subject to and the result of natural selection, that is, the strongest and the fittest and the strongest, the survival of the fittest and the strongest. Estimate military and civilians killed in World War II by country. These are just the evolutionary axis countries. Bulgaria, 60,000. Finland, 104,000. Germany, 505 million. Hungary, 320,000. Italy, 400,000. Japan, 2,100,000, Romania 900,000. Total killed 54,226,000. And those who will not be governed by God will be ruled by tyrants. William Penn. It's true. Although Charles Darwin never visited China, his ideas landed there with force. Darwinian was the first great Western theory to make an impact on Chinese, and from 1895 to at least 1921, when Marxism gained a formal foothold in the dominance, Westernism influenced China's politics and thought. The authority of Darwin, sometimes misinterpreted, influenced reformers and revolutionaries and paved way for Chinese Marxism and thought of Mao Zedong. So it happened over in China too. Social Darwinism has influenced political, public health, and social movements in Japan since the 19th century and early 20th century. Social Darwinism was originally brought to Japan through the works of Francis Galton and Ernest Haeckel, as well as United States, British, and French Lamarckian eugenic written studies of the late 19th and 20th century. Biblical economic understanding. Christian worldview embraces a form of democratic capitalism that allows for the peaceful and free exchange of goods and service without fraud, theft, or breach of contract as a biblical worldview. Social Darwinism economic policy results in nothing but failure and tragedy. Fascism, Nazism, communism, and socialism on the faulty ideas of socialism and Darwinian evolution, and also laissez-faire capitalism is from social Darwinism. Today, we see aspects that's evolved to different areas. It's not quite the same, and people don't recognize it today, but it's still here. We see aspects of survival of the fittest still in our society, although it's no longer called by that name. Here's one. Margaret Sanger, founder of Planned Parenthood and hero of the liberal left. I believe that the white people are superior to other races. I embrace Hitler's eugenics ideology and I support the Ku Klux Klan. I push for the forced sterilization of those less fortunate than me. I oppose charity and welfare for poor because I believe they were better off dead. I ushered in a world where abortion has enabled my idea that some lives matter less. So this was in our country and it's still in our country. It's evolved to different forms now, but it's still going on. Science news from research organizations. Belief in social Darwinism linked to dysfunctional psychological characteristics that he finds. Summary, a new survey study links belief in the concept of social Darwinism with certain dysfunctional psychological characteristics such as exploitive attitude towards others, hostility, and low self-esteem. This is not necessarily social Darwinism, they don't say, they just believe in evolution and survival of the fittest, and that's all it is in today's world. Jesus said, you will know them by their fruits, and social Darwinism shows that Darwinian evolution is a bad idea. All these ideas, Marxism, are bad ideas, and that's what their fruits show. And there is a way which seems right unto a man, but the end of the way thereof always is death. And that's from Proverbs 14:12. And that is the truth. And that's the end of my talk.